What if you had the resources you needed for your mental health right at your fingertips? Imagine a world where our mental well-being is prioritized just like our physical health, and where we have access to the tools and support we need. That's exactly what the Make Mental Health Matter show is all about. Join Kelli Melissa Reinhardt, a true warrior for mental health, founder of Make Mental Health Matter nonprofit, author, and wellness coach. This show is your gateway to breaking down the stigma surrounding mental health. Tune in for enlightening conversations, expert insights, and empowering stories that will not only increase awareness, but also provide education about mental health. It's time to have those hard conversations, prioritize your well-being, and make your mental health matter. Your mental wellness journey starts here. What if you had...
Welcome to another episode of the Make Mental Health Matter show. When life gives you lemons, you make lemonade, or you pivot, or you change. And probably everybody's like, what in the heck are you talking about? You know, technical difficulties happen every once in a while, and you can either freak out about it or you can pivot and just make sure that everything works smoothly. So there was a moment earlier that the program that I run this, I like to give you guys the behind the scenes of the show, and it has nothing to do with my guest, but I just wanted to share this super quick, and then I will introduce my guest because I'm super excited for my guest today. But the program that I run the show on, it had a blip, I guess we'll call it. We'll go with the Marvel blip. And everything deleted, like all of the videos and everything, all the things. And for me, I was like, oh shoot. But the cool part, well, I guess I have most everything in one place on my computer, so I was able to kind of download them all. But now I'm realizing what I need to get organized more. So I guess that kind of goes, not like fully goes into what we're talking about today, but a little bit. And I'm excited because the guests that I have had really kind of, they blend into each other, which I think is such a great part about this show, is being able to bring you resources as the audience, whether you're watching or you're listening. And that way, I mean, really talking about the emotions that come up when we're in relationships, or, you know, the relationship that I have with the program that I use for the show. You know, I can either freak out about it, or, you know, you just get it done, and you have gracious guests who are patient with you. So without rambling too much, let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. So Andrea Medaris is a licensed psychologist, certified supervisor in emotionally focused couple therapy, director of the Center for Relationships at Psychology Specialists in Maine, and president of EFT Maine. She has spent the past decade in clinical work with couples, particularly relationships shaped with trauma, disconnection, and reoccurring conflict. She writes The Emotional Logic, a newsletter makes of love, conflict, and desire. And her first book, What You Wish For, argues that emotional security and passion aren't the trade-off we've been told they are. So without further ado, Andrea, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I think maybe we need to do couple therapy with you and your software.
Right? Yes. Right. It's like, come on. Yeah. But you can't freak out. It's like, you know, just move on. So thank you for your patience.
You bet.
And so I'm very excited to have you on here. Really, I mean, the Make Mental Health Matter show what we'd like to do is give our audience a little information as related to all the things, because we have tons of resources out there, but oftentimes people just don't know where to find them. And so I'm going to change up the show, and people that have been watching or listening for a little while, I want to really talk about, first and foremost, kind of the action behind what you got, or like what got you into this field specifically.
Yeah. I think initially, so I went back to school late. I dropped out of high school and spent 10 years kind of running around the world, and then came back to school after that. And so I got the chance to enter the field of psychology with a lot of life experience that helped me understand what I was learning in a different way than I think I would have if I had gone when I was 19 or whatever. And initially, I wanted to work in trauma therapy. That was my initial interest. And through my postdoc fellowship, I got introduced to couple therapy and just completely fell in love with it, because I think that so much of our injuries in life are relational ones. And what better context to heal that than a relational context? And so I've just seen so much transformation in couple therapy that felt a lot harder and slower in individual therapy, because we were trying to build a relationship between me and the client, right, from scratch, where when you have the live relationship in front of you, it's a lot faster and easier sometimes, and harder in other ways. But that's
Yeah.
where I only do couple therapy now.
Amazing. And so this is gonna seem silly, but I'm curious, like, if you had gone through, like, did you go through like your own experience that you were like, couple therapy is amazing, or like, okay, let me reverse my brain goes a little bit faster most of the time, but I most recently actually was talking to, they're getting married, and they were saying that they just started doing couples therapy. And she was like, when my fiance brought it up, I was like, why would we do it now? And then going into it, she said, wow, this is so amazing, because they're starting to learn how to communicate before they actually get married. Although they have been together for quite some time, she said it's so beneficial to pre-marriage have couples therapy. And I think that oftentimes we in society think, well, I only go to a couples therapist if there's like a big giant issue that happens in my relationship. So I'm curious if you had maybe gone to a couples therapist and you're like, ooh, this is like the space, or maybe like, what's the story behind you wanting to do this specific work?
I think honestly that a lot of it came from the fact that my parents got divorced when I was a teenager. And all throughout my childhood, they were always like, marry your best friend. Had a really great relationship, and I was always convinced that was what I was going to do, right? I was going to find something like that. And so it really kind of blew my mind when they got divorced, seemingly out of nowhere. Like they weren't fighting as far as I could see. And it was very kind of blindsiding to me. And so I think a lot of the root of my interest is that, right? Like, what happened? Why did this happen? Where did it go wrong? And I love that your friends are doing that, because I often I tell, my supervisees a lot that couple therapy sometimes is kind of like oncology, in that people come at all different stages. And if you come early, it's great, right? You can interrupt it well before it becomes entrenched. And sometimes people come in after 30 years of having the same fight. It's a lot harder. It's not impossible, but it's a lot harder. And sometimes it's too late, right, by the time they tried to get intervention. So I've been to like a little bit of couple therapy myself, but not at depth. But my partner and I think, had some of the experiences that we're always trying to choreograph in couple therapy. We're always kind of trying to choreograph this idea of a corrective experience, like where you have an experience of something different from what your old story is. And I think we sort of had some of those organically, and it really convinced me that changing a relationship can change you.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I know throughout time, so I have done like neurolinguistic programming, so coaching. I'm a neurolinguistic programming coach, but I also, my husband and I, before, was it before? I think it was before we got married, actually. We did a couples, and I remember the time that he came down and he's like, wow, this stuff really works. And I was like, well, yeah, like when you actually talk to people, it is helpful. So,
Imagine.
yeah, right. Imagine that. Yes. But I mean, I think it is, we go through these experiences throughout life, and it is one of those moments that you're like, wow, why did that happen? And wanting to understand, and then transferring that into what you do, I think is so wonderful.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are become therapists because we're trying to heal something, right, or understand something, or both. And it's great when that works, right? When we can kind of do our own work and figure that out and use the field as a way to understand ourselves in a different way is really a gift.
Yeah. And I always say every therapist needs a therapist.
Yes. That is a true statement.
I'm like, all of us in the mental health space tend to forget ourselves, because we're always, well, not always, but a lot of us are very giving and very helpful, and being able to focus on ourselves, I think, is beneficial. I'm curious also because you do work a lot with so the emotionally focused. Can you tell me a little bit more about that, like what that means specifically?
Yeah. So the little bit of couple therapy that I have done was not that type. So there's different, just like in individual therapy, you have your CBT and DBT and all the other acronyms. Well, in couple therapy, we have our own modalities too. And the person that my husband and I saw kind of early on in our marriage was a different modality than this. And we both kind of felt like this is a little basic, like it was a little, here's some communication skills, and communication skills are excellent, and they don't help that much when you're really escalated. Right? You can't access the part of you that is like, I know what to say now, right? That's not on the menu sometimes if we're really upset. And so emotionally focused therapy comes from attachment theory. So everybody's talking about that a lot right now in good and bad ways. But it comes from this idea that we learned how to be. We learned how to be in relationship. We learned what to expect from other people. And everything that we do makes sense if we know the history and context of where it came from. And so part of it is that historical idea. But the bigger part, I think, is that it's very focused on having a different experience, that you don't just have info, right? So we're not just teaching you a skill. We're also trying to kind of choreograph a situation where you can talk to your partner in a different way, get a different response, and build some muscle memory that you can access in the moments where the escalation comes for you. And so instead of you getting a fight, you're trying to, remember what was on page 4 of the manual that you read, right? Instead, your body has a memory of last time I told them the real vulnerable thing, they responded well. Maybe it's worth a risk, and maybe it's worth a try. And that's the idea behind the change that we're going for, is trying to kind of revise that body system of what does it feel like when you talk about how you feel while you're feeling it and have your partner respond. It can change your kind of core expectation of what is going to happen.
I love that. And I mean, so I know there's also a lot of conversations now. We talk about like somatic therapy and really like tapping into our emotions and our body and how it's feeling, where it's feeling. And I think that's super cool. I guess, I don't know why I never thought about couple therapy doing that, right? I mean, it's like, hello, the emotions.
Right.
But like really tapping in of like, where, when I'm saying this to my partner, where is it like showing up in my body? Like, where am I tensing up, or being able to allow our emotions, but also our body to be able to, yeah, feel safe. Because I think that's ultimately like, we should feel safe in our relationships, and some people may not. And so I think it is important, instead of the like, everybody explodes and then it tops and that, you know, everybody's like in the relationship, you're trying to talk over each other, or you just walk away and then the other one, you know, all the things. So I love that changing the narrative around relationship and how we communicate, I think, is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the emotional piece is so important, because we are never fighting about what we're fighting about. You know, we think we are. We think that the thing that matters the most right now is that you said you were going to do the dishes and you didn't. And why didn't you? And why won't you next time? And how can I trust what you're going to say? But when you look at, you know, what do you feel when you say that? What meaning are you making about that? What do you want here? You know, that it always, right, pretty much always gets down to, I don't feel like you're there for me. I feel all alone here. I'm scared I don't really matter to you. And that stuff is a lot easier to respond to than, why didn't you do the dishes this time? Right? And so that's a lot of what we're doing, is both kind of like mapping that out. What's the thought? What's the feeling? What's the behavior? What's all the pieces of this emotional moment? And, you know, what's the need or want or fear that's underneath it? And yeah, it's all geared towards clarifying the emotional signal, so that the partner knows what they're supposed to respond to.
That's what, when you were saying that, in my brain, I was thinking, well, have you let them know, like, that you want them to do the dishes, right? I think we also assume that we're like, hey, there's dishes in the in the sink. Why didn't you do them? Yes. But I think you also have to consider, in relationships, we do also have to be able to speak what we need or how we're feeling. And so that's what I hear from you, as being able to, instead of it's about the dishes, because yes, it is usually something else that's going on that we're just not sure how to express. So I love the way of how you can help couples in that space. We're going to go to our quick first sponsored break. And then once we get back, we're going to have more conversations really around all of this. So we'll be right back after this quick sponsor break.
Have you ever felt completely alone?
Like your life doesn't matter.
One person dies due to suicide every 40 seconds.
You are not alone. Call the National Suicide Lifeline at 988.
Hope and recovery is possible.
1 in 8 people globally live with a mental disorder.
That's why empowering minds saves lives.
We need your help.
With only $19 a month, you help us save lives through mental health and suicide prevention education.
Scan the QR code or go to makementalhealthmatter.org to sign up as a warrior for mental health today.
And like that, we're back again. If you happen to be just joining the Make Mental Health Matter show, thank you so much for tuning in, whether you are watching or listening. My guest, Andrea, and I are talking about her, like, what she does is help couples, more specifically really around emotional trauma, disconnection, and connecting. And that's where I kind of wanted to go a little bit more, because we talked about focusing on the emotions, generally what we say, like if it's a fight about the dishes, or the laundry or whatever it happens to be, there's generally something under that. We're not actually fighting about that, unless you really like the dishes done. I don't know. But I wanted to go more into just having conversations about, and I know that you can't give us specific examples or anything, you know, due to HIPAA, right? But the layers of trauma. And I know, like, in your bio it talked about reoccurring conflict, but also like that disconnection piece, because I don't know, I mean, I think that, well, if you have a long, I'm like, how do I put this? A long-term relationship that whether you've been with them, you've been married, or whatever it might be, sometime we go through like highs and lows. And I think all relationships are that way. Even, I mean, business partners, friends, all the things. And sometimes there's this part where we feel really disconnected, or maybe there was a trauma that happened that created the disconnection. So I'm curious, like, in the work that you do, how do you get them to really like reconnect? I know you talked about the emotional aspect, but I'm just curious around that.
Yeah. I work quite a lot with relationships where either one or both partners have a pretty significant trauma history. And a lot of times it's both. I think we find each other, sometimes in that way. But it's a slow, tricky process, because I think a lot of times our trauma was relational in nature. Almost all. I think trauma is at least somewhat relational in nature. And so we have all of these experiences of the person I go to is the scary person, right? The person I need comfort from maybe hurts me or invalidates me or disappears when I really need them. And when we're kids, we don't really have a lot of options. We have to go to that person. That's the person that we have, right? And so later on in life, those echoes come back for us, and they really make the conflict a little bit more confusing, because yes, now I'm mad about the dishes. I'm also mad that maybe I don't feel partnered in this situation. And then on another level, maybe I'm also scared about it, or I feel abandoned here, or, this thing so one thing that happens a lot, and when people tell me about a fight, is one person says what happened, the other person says, that's not what happened, I didn't say that. We have different memories of what happened, which is normal, and that's just how memory is. But that difference can be really triggering for people who have had their experience invalidated a lot. Right? And so they come in and say, oh, that's not what happened. And now it feels just like all the times when somebody said, your reality is not your reality. And so that's a big difficulty in couple therapy and therapy in general, and life in general. And so a lot of it is about a lot of validation from me, and a lot of normalization of it's okay that you remember it differently. That's just how minds are. But the change event, I think, is almost kind of takes a lot of setup. And so we do a lot of work around de-escalation. That's stage 1 of EFT. We're trying to calm everything down somewhat and understand what's going on. And so that's a lot of the, what is the cycle? What's your move in this? What do you do? What do they take from that, etc. And then once we get things calmed down somewhat, we do stage 2, which is kind of the deeper, more emotional, slower revising. We're trying to revise the story of what you can expect from other people and what to do when those echoes come for you. Right? When you have a memory of what happened to you that's now in the mix, and how your partner can see that and not just go, oh, well, you're totally overreacting to this situation. Because you're not overreacting. You're just not reacting to this. You're reacting to something else, and that deserves to be heard too. And so a lot of it is about that, about both kind of normalizing that and having a different experience with somebody hearing your experience and saying that makes sense.
I love that. And I love that you also brought up childhood, right? Because I know we are, and it has been for a couple years, that we're really talking about childhood experiences, whether it was traumatic or not. But also, I know you talked about the, like, there's nature versus nurture and all, there's so many more levels that we hyper focus. Like, it's like the dishes, but then it's like, where did this come from? Like, why am I so mad about the dishes? And it may have been something from when you were younger that you were told that you had to have the dishes done or whatever that might be. And we bring ourselves into every single relationship. And I never, I can't say I never understood that, but I didn't fully get it until I really started getting myself educated. So like doing more NLP and learning about the brain. And now I'm a super nerd, I feel like, about the brain. But it's so fascinating because I was like, oh, that's why I do that, right? And then I could really pause in moments or learn to shift and change and approach things differently. I'm not saying I'm perfect by any means, but I definitely, it gave me a completely different perspective that I never thought I would get to a point. Yeah, so it's fascinating what in our young lives can affect us as adults. And then I also try to be mindful with that with my kids, is like, what am I teaching them? And in our relationship, in our marriage, what are we teaching them, right? And my husband and I did create a rule that we don't fight in front of the kids. I know sometimes we can't really help it, but there's been blow-ups that have happened, and we're like, this shouldn't be what they're observing. And so being mindful of that when you have children in the household, and it can be challenging, but I think there's so much more layers to all the conflicts in life.
So many more. And we all learn from what happened to us, right? And all good and bad and otherwise, right? And so it's hard to take any kind of interaction out of that context and say, this is what's happening, because if we don't understand everything that came before that, can we really make it make sense? It seems like a wild overreaction most of the time to the situation, because it would be if it was just reacting to that situation, but it's not. It never is. Even when there's no trauma, that's still, there's still a lot going on under the surface. And whether this is your first fight or your 30th fight or your 5,000th fight makes a huge difference in how you experience it.
Yeah. I'm also there's a lot of conversations around generational trauma also, which I think is super fascinating. But as I think too, is like, as a mom, because, well, as a daughter and a mom, right? You think about like what we learned and what we experienced, and then now how it's so different. But then you think about like when I was pregnant, what was going on then, and all those different things. And I think it's just, again, we take ourselves into every relationship, and it could be relationships with friends, it could be relationships with partners, and I also reflect on even like friendships can be couples, right? Because there may be something that happened around that friend group that you're like, I don't want to be friends with them, or I don't trust anybody. Like, I've heard that one before, is like, based off of what happened in high school or middle school or elementary, right? They're like, I don't trust people, therefore I don't have friends. And you're like, but you do, you just, like, those are the things that I'm like, sometimes I don't know how to navigate those, but I would imagine that you probably see a lot of that too, as that trust factor.
For sure. And again, it makes sense, right? If people have betrayed you, it's hard to trust somebody else. And it's hard, especially if the person who betrayed you is the one you're still married to, which is often happens, right? And we talk about that a lot. And a lot of it, I think, is about what you actually want in that moment, right? That I'll never trust anyone, is a partially, I kind of blame myself for trusting the person that betrayed me in the first place. If I hadn't been so gullible, this wouldn't have happened to me, which I really challenge, because you are not the one who violated the trust, right? You are not the one who did anything wrong there. And we like to think we can keep that from happening to us. And we kind of can't. And so I think a lot of the work of it is accepting that we don't always have the ability to keep bad things from happening, or even often we don't. And do we want to live a life where we're so protected from that we don't have any connection or experience that might be good? Because you can't really selectively close the door, right? You either open the door and maybe you get hurt, or maybe it's great, or you don't open it and neither of those happens. And so if we really can't control the outcome, do we want to make space for something good to happen or not?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's so much space for goodness.
There is.
We're going to go to our last sponsored break, and then I know where I want to go after this. So we'll be right back after this quick sponsor break.
1,917 people die daily from suicide globally.
I lost my middle sister, Carrie, to a completed suicide on February 20th, 2017.
How does Kelli, host of the Make Mental Health Matter show, impact lives?
Number 1. Awareness.
My story, all over it, isn't unique. I am a domestic violence survivor and a recovering addict. For 14 years, I was in active addiction. And because of Kelli and the work that she does and the opportunity to have my voice heard, I was able to stay clean and sober and have hit a year. I'm still here. And if it wasn't for Kelli answering my call the day that I thought I was going to take my life.
2. Conversation.
I'm curious, and I know that I've heard a lot in the BIPOC community, it is very hush-hush. It's like one of those things that you don't talk about. Like, you literally feel like it's not a conversation you can have. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
First, shout out to Kelli, because I'm glad that she asked the question. I researched you before I went on your show, and I saw how real and authentic you were. And I just appreciate the question, because it is different and we have to have tough, courageous conversations. So yes, I always say I'm a triple diversity threat. I'm a Black woman with multiple disabilities. Now, I'm not really a threat, but to other people, I may be, because people fear the unknown and what they're uncomfortable with.
Number 3. Education.
Kelli's passionate commitment to mental health awareness is a beautiful thing. It's clear in her social media posts, it's clear in the resources that she puts together, in the activities that she provides, her collaboration with organizations, and the consistent way that she continues to deliver a message, encouraging people to understand that they can share openly and to break the stigma around mental health. Kelli's topics cover children and adults, talk about things that we can do as a community, things that we can do individually, and her website is packed with information and resources and all kinds of contacts that you can use to reach out, whether you're dealing with something yourself or you're looking to help somebody else who is struggling. I encourage you to check it out.
And like that, we're back again. If you are just tuning into the Make Mental Health Matter show, thank you so much. You missed the whole beginning, so make sure you go back. My guest, Andrea, and I are chatting about couples, relationships, whether there is trauma and how that can really, trauma, disconnection, all the things, right? Emotions, what we fight about, and what it means or doesn't mean. This part, I want to kind of go more into the education piece. And I know that you said you write for the Emotional Logic, which is a newsletter that makes sense about love, conflict, and desire. And then you also have a book. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. What are some of the things in the Emotional Logic that people would be able to check out?
So right now, I think a lot of what I've been writing about is kind of the same stuff that I'm writing about in the book. So it's a lot of the same themes, which is basically that we have a drive for safety in life and we have a drive for exploration, and that those things can work together. And so they are not in conflict as we often think. We often think what familiarity kills desire, right? That we don't continue to feel interested over a long period of time in a relationship. And so I'm always kind of trying to challenge that idea and to say that if we do establish enough safety, that it allows us to explore and evolve and grow and be, connected about that. And so that's kind of what's there right now. But what I'm actually been thinking about, and I think I'm actually going to do maybe in the next week or so, and so maybe by the time you hear this, it'll already exist, that I have done a lot of work with DBT and alongside my couple work, both personally and professionally. And I run a group for couples that was a DBT group, but it had a lot of relational applications that aren't usually included in regular DBT. And I think that I'm probably, well, definitely, let's just say definitely, going to include a lot of those things, a lot of those resources there, to add more kind of skills, but also, yeah, this thing you're saying about deepening safety and exploration sounds great, but I am way too activated to do any of that business, right? And so what do we do in that case when we need some support to even get to the place where we can build those things? And so that's kind of my next project, is adding in a lot of those tools and, taking DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy is what I'm talking about, and making that a relational thing that couples can do together and not something that we're doing in isolation, which is often the case with individual DBT groups. Or if you've ever done one of those, there's a lot of homework that's like, practice this relational thing, and then you're practicing it on people who have no idea what you're doing or why you're doing it, and it doesn't always go super well. So I'm hoping that people can try them together and it will be more powerful. That's the plan.
That's awesome. And so just because I know, like, DBT, I know you said the long word for it,
Yes.
but just so people, because I think that there's a lot of acronyms out there, and we hear DBT and we hear the clinical name, and then we're like, what does that
I don't know
actually
what that
mean?
is.
Yeah, so could you just explain a little bit more about DBT?
Yes. So DBT is a pretty common skills-based treatment for complex trauma, for suicidality, for borderline personality disorder, for a lot of different presentations of what I kind of think of as being relational difficulties. But it has 4 kind of modules that are part of it. So mindfulness is the one that most people know. And then there's also distress tolerance, interpersonal effectiveness, and emotion regulation. So a lot of it is honestly things I feel like we should teach in high school, like how to be a person 101. There's a lot of skills in there that really help with, I'm too flooded to figure out what to do next. I don't know how to access my own emotional experience. I don't know how to make a good decision when I'm getting a lot of emotional information, right? All that kind of stuff is in there. And there's a lot of physiological interventions that kind of help calm down quickly and things like that, which I find really helpful personally in time, my own anxiety sometimes. So it's the therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, is a very skills-based model and usually has a group where you learn the skills alongside an individual therapy that you're doing at the same time. So the couple angle on that is just kind of taking some of those things and making them things you can practice together instead of just trying to do it on your own.
I love that. And thank you for explaining it that way, because I've had other guests also, but you explained it so succinct, I feel like, and it makes so much more sense. So, But I think it is also good for the audience to know, like, when people say these different acronyms, you're like, oh, that's what it is, right?
Yeah. Get too lost in my clinical. Yes, thank you.
No, you're good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different modalities. I call them modalities. And I know even like in the coaching side, we have all kinds, right? So, I mean, there's like way too many to even try to list, but the same in the therapy, counseling, mental health space, right? There's so many different ways that we can help and support people. And I think that's the most important part, is that there are lots of resources out there. And again, that's why I love doing the show, is just because I can bring people resources like you that have much more knowledge than, you know, some of us. And then we can actually like really fully understand how we can help ourselves, how we can help other people that are in our lives, where we can actually go to find this information, and how it may be supportive for us or not, right? And I mentioned to people, like, make sure you do kind of like a speed dating type of thing. I say I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and that is okay. But I also have a really great network of people that I can refer to, and you can do speed dating with your therapist if you choose to.
I feel like we should set something like that up, where we just, have little tables and people can just come around and be like, nope, not for me. Thanks. Move along.
Yeah. Like, so what would you like to work on today? And they're like, I gotta go. No. That would be fun. So the book, is the book out, or you are currently writing it?
I have written it. It is now on the editor's desks while the editors are on vacation. So we'll see. We'll see. It's in process, but hopefully it will exist sometime.
Yeah. No, that's all. It's a big process to write your own book. Yeah. And I know, I mean, just even having a newsletter that people can tap into, what is the best way, or like, how could they become a part of that so that they are getting this information?
Yeah. So the newsletter is called The Emotional Logic. TheEmotionalLogic.com is the easiest way to find it. There's many other ways, but they require you to learn how to spell Medaris, which don't try. It's fine. It's hard. It's fine. So, that's the best way. Pretty much from there you can find everything else. And the DBT stuff, which is my plan for the next week, I think will probably be there pretty soon.
That's awesome.
And yeah.
So those of you that are listening, I know I have it scrolling down at the bottom, but it is the THE emotional EMOTION AL logic LOGIC.com. So theemotionallogic.com. And yes, there are 2 E's and 2 L's.
Yes.
I'm like, make sure you get the doubles in there. And I think that, I mean, being able to take all of your knowledge and put it into one space, but then also, I would imagine that, do you do sessions with couples virtually, or is it just in person?
I do virtually. I am SIPAC licensed, meaning I can practice, that's what I'm trying to say, practice across most of the U.S. Depends on the state. But yeah, I do see clients kind of all over the place sometimes.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And we have about 10 minutes. So,
great.
I'm curious if there are any like tips or tools or anything that you would want to share with the audience.
I think so. Some of the things that we tend to do in couple therapy are things that you can do without us. It's harder because it's harder to guide yourself through anything than it is to have somebody here hanging out with you while you're trying to do it. But it's still possible. And so a lot of what we're doing, especially throughout the first part of therapy, is when you see your partner do something that you don't like and you have a feeling about it, you don't like it, maybe you get mad, then the next question might be, how am I explaining to myself what they just did? How do I understand what happened? And where did that explanation come from? And is it true? Right? And so that's the really cognitive way to go about it. But it is sometimes helpful, especially if you're catching it early before the fight has a chance to get going and then you have lost access to that part of yourself. But early on, I think it's a good question. Where did I get this idea? Is this true? And what do I feel about it? What is that feeling trying to tell me? I think a lot of us think that our emotions are giving us errors, that it's giving us information we shouldn't trust and we should override it with logic, hence the name of my newsletter. But that I think emotions are incredibly logical, that they are very there for a reason. They're trying to tell us something important. And if we listen to it, and not with is this everything you're saying factual, but what are you trying to say? What do I want? What am I scared of? What's upsetting me? What do I need here? And so kind of putting those pieces together of what perception am I drawing? How is it making me feel? What is that feeling trying to do for me? And what do the things I do next tend to produce? What do I mean for them to do, and what do they actually do? And so if I, for example, I tell my partner, you said you were going to do this yesterday and you didn't, you never do what you say you're going to do, right? A lot of relationship skills would tell you next you should not use that language. You should use a different statement. You should say, I feel upset when you do this thing that I don't like, or when you don't do what you said you were going to do. And that's fine. That's not a bad intervention. But my question would be, what is it like for you when they don't do what they say they're going to do? What sucks about that? I bet it's a good reason that it sucks, right? And if we assume that to begin with, that whatever we're feeling has a good reason, it can give us a chance to ask some more questions about it. More curiosity. I think that's my encouragement to all.
Yeah, I probably use the phrase "I'm curious" a little too much. But
Same here.
I'm curious about, and people are like, okay, you say that all the time. I try to switch them up, the I statements. That's what.
I wonder if you have considered.
Yes.
Yeah.
I observed. Yeah. But it's so true though, because when we assume, right? And I always think of the when we assume the ass you me, right?
Yeah.
I think college is when I saw that and I was like, oh, that's awesome. But when you assume it, that it's almost like we start going into these rabbit holes in our own brain, right? Because then you're like, well, it means that this, or it means that this. So I love how you said, ask yourself the question. And then why is it coming up or feeling that way? I know for me, I say, is this about me or is it about them? Like if somebody is coming at me with an attitude and I have to ask myself, because I know which way I might go if I assume that it's about me, right? Because then I'll get really defensive and I throw up my wall. I know enough about myself that is how I will react. And so I have to ask myself, is this about me or about them? Mm-hmm. And if it is about me, then I feel like I do, or I try to, do a little bit more work around well, why is it triggering? That's a word I love that you said though, because the word I use triggering and I don't like to use that word as much. But how is that making me feel? Instead of, because I'm very kinesthetic and I'm such a feeler. How does that make me feel instead of why is this triggering me? So I can figure out what is it within me that is causing this reaction. But then if it's about them, I can just let it go, because maybe they just need that moment to explode about whatever it is. And it doesn't, earlier, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it's about the dishes. But I know in some moments that it's I haven't gotten, I'm like, I think of the dishes. I'm like, you haven't gotten to the dishes yet. And then they do the dishes and you're like, oh crap, I meant to do the dishes. And then they're like, no, it's fine. Anyways, there's a whole process that happens in our brain around dishes.
Yes. We always go to that example because, man, it sure happens all the time. Yeah.
Like, such a great example. Well, any last thoughts that you wanted to share that maybe we didn't get to?
I feel like we got to a lot. I think that everything that we're experiencing is happening in a context that is larger than us, that we're connected to other people one way or another, for better or worse, and that if we have any kind of mental health challenge, which most of us do, that's happening in a context. And if we can look at the context sometimes and not just within ourselves for the source of the problem, that it can give us another intervention place, that we want to be doing work on ourselves. And we also maybe want to be doing work on the connections we have to other people so that they can give us a stronger, resilient space, stronger support, stronger connection. Because we're not all alone here. I think that's what I really want to say. And taking that seriously is a really good way to feel better.
I love that. And one last time, I'm gonna put myself back down here.
Thank you.
It's the emotionallogic.com that you can go find Andrea, find her newsletter, and find the book once it's launched. Yes. This was such a great conversation. I greatly appreciate you being here, but also the work that you do to help couples and relationships in general, right? Just because it is something we should be really proactive versus reactive. And when we can tap into our emotions, when we can really find the layers versus just staying at the surface level, it's going to help deepen our relationship, not only with our partner, but also with ourselves. And I think that's the most important part. So thank you so much for being such an amazing guest and being patient with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
All right, y'all. That was another amazing episode of the Make Mental Health Matter show. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope this is helpful. I don't know about you, but it was for me. Relationships can be challenging, right? They don't have to be hard. Whatever your experience is your experience. And knowing that we are two very different humans that are in a relationship with each other. We have two very different experiences, whether we're in the same exact experience. And there's ways that we can help ourselves. There's ways that we can ask questions to ourselves and to our partners to be able to, open that conversation, have that communication. And I think it is important to have a therapist, a counselor, a coach, somebody that is on your side to be able to help you navigate those. So I invite you to think about what is one action that you can take for yourself to really promote mental wellness. And then what is that conversation that you need to have, whether it is with maybe yourself or with others, and then get that education. And again, you can go to the emotionallogic.com and you can check out her newsletter. Maybe you need some more tools in your tool belt, but whatever it is, make sure that you come back next week. I go live every single Monday at 5 a.m. or 5 p.m. on Dream Vision 7 Radio, or you can watch on E360 TV at 5 p.m. all Mountain Denver time. I will see you all next week. Bye, y'all.
Thank you for joining today for the Make Mental Health Matter show. We hope you found today's episode insightful and empowering. Remember, your mental health journey doesn't end here. For more resources, support, and information, visit us online at makementalhealthmatter.org. You won't forget to subscribe to our show or follow us on social media to stay connected and continue the conversation, will you? That's right. Together, let's make mental health matter. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.